Good afternoon. Welcome in this session. My name is Stijn Rommens. You're in the most quiet room of this auditorium or on this floor, but still it's very loud. It's a bit weird to start to be speaking here. I don't hear myself. I hope you hear myself very well. So let's kick it off. Today is going to be an introduction for many probably, but also for others maybe a refresh on what can you do about cyber attacks, and especially when a little bit has happened already in your environment, and when can you still stop it. So that is really what's happening, and especially also it is not something that happens just because. I often hear like, oh, we had a phishing attack and the result was ransomware. Of course it doesn't happen like that. There is no black magic with anything like cyber. Let's deep dive into it. I'm going to give you a couple of introductions, but I'll also go to the meat of what we do a bit on the AI, what are the different components we cover, and from there I hope you have a good understanding of what we do. One of the issues we see is that we have a problem of more in cybersecurity. More tools, more of anything, right? And at a certain point in time, it results into stress, into problems. And on top of that, all of what we add today, preventive capabilities, etc., are not helping us to resolve the unknown problem, because what you don't know you can't scan for, but for that you need to apply new ways of identifying the unknown stuff, and that is really where it all matters. The biggest problem is that also due to COVID, or maybe thanks to COVID, hybrid organizations have been grown much more quickly, right? We're no longer in a static environment with only a network, a data center, physical network, a data center. We're also in IaaS, we're using SaaS, we're using a lot of those tools to keep on working to continue our business. But it also makes it more difficult, I must say, to cover everything on a simple way or with one platform. So that is the bigger issue that we see. Secondly, what we also see is that attacks are becoming quite evasive, but at the same time also are repeating. More and more we see ransomware as a service, Logbit 3.0 or Logbit in general, they evolve, now they are 3.0, Play and other ransomware gangs. They kind of offer a platform, a service. You don't even have to be a hacker anymore to use a tool and to try to address and attack an organization. You can just borrow that, you can buy that with Bitcoin, and you have the full access. And even all of the negotiation when it comes to ransomware will be done for you. So there's a lot of things that happen today. They reuse things, but at the same time, they stay under the radar, and it's therefore very difficult to detect. And then finally, I'm happy to see so many people here, but our organizations we work with are struggling to get the right people in their SOCs, in their security teams, and if they do have them, because of the flood of data, they have a hard time to work. And now we already come to a couple of cornerstones of Vectra. What we want to do is deliver a clear signal. We call that attack signal intelligence, and how we do that, I'm hopefully going to explain that to you in the next few minutes. When you look at this, normally that should not be a surprise. What you see here is an attack kill chain, right? As I pointed out, a ransomware or any other attack where people could steal your data is not happening out of the blue. It will take phases, or it will require steps. Yes, often a phishing, but more and more we also see that it's just a simple credential logon. People have stolen it, have sold it even to one of those hacker groups, and you actually have access to that environment at once. So it's not even required anymore sometimes to hunt for malware or for CVEs, because it's just using a regular login, and then it uses what we call off-the-shelf or living off the land tools that are not unique. But in this case, what you see here is all of the different steps also give you an indication that it's never too late. Even after that initial compromise, there's a lot of things you can do, and then is where Vectra will come also in play. So what we have tried to look for is think like an attacker, right? Rather than just looking for new IOCs, building new threat feeds, and deploy that as fast and quickly and everywhere you can. No, let's take a step back. Because today CVE X is going to be important, and tomorrow it's another vulnerability, and the day after it's a password login. But once that is abused, the result of that is the same. An hacker has access, he's looking for new information in the network, doing the reconnaissance, doing the lateral, and then from there, all of those behaviors are going to be similar. They're not changing every day. So if you could deploy something or develop something that looks at behavior rather than at indicators, or not only at indicators, I think you're on the right path. And that is what we want to do, deliver something that also gives you something in minutes rather than having to sift through tons and tons of log files. This is the most marketing slide, the biggest marketing slide I have, but I want to give it to you to give you a good understanding of what the entire platform is. And it actually starts with coverage. As I pointed out, the hybrid enterprise requires coverage of your network, so you need to see raw network data, you need to be able to see all of those flows in your network, but you need also to do that in your IaaS. You might also need to do that in your M365 and your Azure AD. And keep in mind, if you control, for instance, your Azure or AWS infrastructure, keep losing the keys to the control plane of that infrastructure is going to cost you a lot. The hacker could even lock you out of your own infrastructure. So that also needs to come into the equation. That's the coverage levels that we have on all of the technology. And then you need to come to clarity. What we want to resolve here is the flood of data that is being sent to a SIEM or a SOAR or a SOC in general, and then leave it to them to find the needle in the haystack. What we want to do is deliver a clear signal, not a signal of an event that has happened, but a signal of a machine that might have been compromised or is part of an attack, so that you can focus. You start from there and then look at the details, and that will work out, because now you have a point to start from, rather than you have to find that needle and then go through all of the rest. And then finally, with that, doing the detections on a machine learning way. Let's forget about the marketing term AI. Everyone is using that. By the way, we're proud of it. We are one of the 2 security companies in the Forbes 50 of AI companies. But having said that, it is not ChatGTP, right? This is really machine learning. This is data science that is looking for the right algorithms to tackle the right problem and the specific problem, and not look for just anomaly-based detection, right? Because that's also a mathematical equation of Bayesian models. Triaging is also important, because if you look at behavior, right, it could be that you flag the communication from your endpoints to your vulnerability scanner or your antivirus as command and control. The act is, and the behavior is similar. But with AI triage, you can look at a lot of parameters to conclude that that behavior, in this case, is not malicious. And for that, filter it out. Not delete it, filter it out. Reduce the impact on the scoring. You can always find it back if, for instance, there was a mistake made. And then drive the priority. That's what I pointed out with flag what machine is important to look at. So we're working with a list of machines that are most suspicious based on multiple factors, from the threats that we saw, but also the velocity of what happened on that machine, but maybe even the priority of that machine in your environment. All of those factors included will give you a score that will tell you look at it or not, right? And then it's still up to you as an individual, as a company, to work with that intelligence. So we deliver good signal so that the people can do a good job on addressing the problem. And then, of course, you need to control this. And what is control? Could be to investigate, right? Do an investigation, do hunting, validate stuff. It also could be integrate with your firewalls or with your network infrastructure to isolate machines that look suspicious. But it should always be something intelligently, right? And one of the things that I want to always flag is that a lot of times we are told, like, hey, you need to be able to do 100% automatic reaction. But think about it, if it is a really advanced persistent threat, it's not that one machine only that's the problem, right? You would really fool yourself by just blocking that one and think all is under control. They have a backup and a backup of a backup and a backup of the backup and later a backup of all of those backups, right? So investigate, right? Yes, you can mitigate and reduce the speed, but don't think automatic responses are there. I am a bit passionate about that, but it's because I have to fight that every day. So, how do we do it? Going from marketing into the real meat. So I have 20 minutes left, that would be perfect. So, architectural slide, very simple. I hope that is not going to be groundbreaking. What I want to point out here is coverage of the hybrid enterprise. You have sensors, vertical, physical, virtual, physical, can be deployed in your environment that tap the traffic on span ports, taps, or packet brokers. That's as simple as it is for the network. And then on the cloud side, we have integrations on the APIs of Microsoft, of AWS, to retrieve log files. And all of the intelligence happens in one central place, which we call the brain. So we really tap traffic, format that in an intelligent way. We call that metadata. Not only we call that metadata, a lot of companies do. It's type of browse type of information. We deliver that centrally, and then the intelligence of the machine learning is running on the brain. If it have a detection, it can forward it into a SIEM, SOAR, playbook, or you can build your own APIs with your own infrastructure to take an action. Very simple, straightforward, very effective, no software required, no agents to be deployed. All right, so what is it then that we do? We focus on behavior, as I said, and where does that behavior come from? By understanding what the attacker could do. Think like an attacker, I pointed it out already. And how do we know that? Because a lot of research is already done on describing what are the tactics, techniques, and procedures that an adversary can do. And they are included in MITRE. So we map every detection with a T in that MITRE framework, and then you can map the Ts with hosts and accounts, and then from there start building prioritization. If you see multiple faces connected to one machine, hey, there is something ongoing. If you only see a scan on one machine, it's most likely vulnerability scanning or something like that. Don't look at it at once. But multiple faces, yes, take action, right? And even if you do see 2 or 3 phases of the attack, it's maybe not even too late. So yes, it is post-compromise, but not post-breach. It's still pre-breach, right? Very small nuance, but it's a very important one. I think we're also unique in not just looking at the attack framework, but also by leveraging the patterns that we have built. MITRE could reference us in a lot of the defense steps, the countermeasures that you can take. And then of course from there, we have understood what do we need to do? Write signatures? No. Can you use that later on? Yes. But the prime is to sift the hay away so you find the needle, and for that we have developed a lot of machine learning, the AI. So what is that AI going to look like? Security research will result into machine learning. That means security people are researching potential breaches or compromises, and that technique will be prototyped over and over and over again until they have so much data that is always proving what they do. They can hand that over to the data scientist. He doesn't need to know what an attack is. He doesn't need to know even what security is. He needs to know how to handle that data to deliver a clear signal out of it that is not a false positive, is not a false negative, but is as close as possible to a true match. And that is exactly what we do. And we do use multiple different items. I kind of run away with this slide without showing it to you. That's the problem of standing here and not seeing the screen very well. But it actually comes down to doing the research, building your models offline, try and test them out, test them in controlled environments, have friendly customers that do that, do it in your own environments, and keep on working, and don't spend time on the interface until you have a clear detection. Because you might have to change things. The output of that model might be different over the time. So only do that when you have a solid model. And then of course, keep on running. We have models that are sometimes 8 to 10 years old that have been only minorly changed over the time. You don't need to tweak them, you don't need to tune them, you need never ever to touch a configuration parameter of any of those models. So maybe that is then a little bit of AI, but it's not going to change and give you a unique name to the detection that we clearly defined ourselves before. So with this, let's give an example. This is one example of what the work we did on trying to come to a piece of work to identify command and control. Is there one model we have? No. There's probably maybe 5 to 10 different models we developed, but they work in combination. And they will find different types of command and control. But what you, for instance, can see here is that this is an example of a pre-learned or a supervised model. Right? And a supervised model is very quick because it has been trained all the way. And it is using, in this case, not just an anomaly-based detection, no, it's deep learning. It's recurrent neural networks. That means the data is going to be fed in over and over again and is going to be tuned by the model itself. And what is important here is not only the data it sees, but it will start to look into timelines. So timing becomes an important part of this neural network. How quickly is a response coming to a request on the network, for instance? All of these factors are taken into account, and that will result, in this case, into an HTTPS tunnel mode detection model. In the reality, I can show you this. Very simple. This is you going to LinkedIn, We're on a job burst. Oh no, we're not on a job fair here. We're on a security event. So you can go to LinkedIn or Google. You type in the URL. You download a picture or a PDF, and you will see that the receive line is higher than the send line. That's normal. You always receive more, typically more than that you send with a web browser, right? That's very simple. That's even hopefully not a patient, because that's a flat line, but this is the way that you look at data of web. If you look at command and control, it's going to be completely different. And it's not only the spikes that are different, but it's the timing of those spikes that are different. So rather than seeing first something on the send, you actually might see something on the receive, because that session initially indeed is built from internal to external, but is then taken over by the attacker to communicate in. And he will do an instruction. Do a port scan, do mimikatz on that machine, and then from there, send me the result. And the result typically is higher than what you requested to do. So you kind of come up to the reverse. It's just not enough to say like, look at volume. This is too simple, but it gives you an indicator of there is communication, there is interaction, which is not normally seen when you look at normal web traffic. Okay? Not even when it is a video that is being played, that's a lot of downstream data. How will this look in the interface? Very simple interface, you could say, but it gives you all the required information. It tells you what is the score and to what machine is this linked, not just an IP address. We've learned the machine name, that's a key capability, because on the Wi-Fi and on the LAN, it's different IP addresses, but it's the same machine. Do that, work on it. Don't spill time in your SIEM to try to figure out all of the different IPs that's already here. Give a score to the individual detection and then correlate that score back into the machine. And then we give you information about the detection. You could say it's too simple, but it's a lot. The JA3 is a unique hash of the source as well as the destination, right? Like you do a hash on a file, the SHA hashes. This is a JA3 hash. It tells you, for instance, the machine version, Windows, Linux, Mac, the browser version, the destination it went to, and a lot more parameters. And these will result into one figure. And that figure is going to be known somewhere in a JA3 database. And if many people with the same combination go to the same site, you will have a lot of matches on that JA3. However, if you start to have only a few matches, then you start to investigate. The same for the server side, so the destination, that's also fingerprinted. These are unique tools or useful tools to go with. And then we looked at the behavior, and in this case we said it is an abnormal beacon, if I'm not mistaken. It could also be multiple TCP, short, long sessions, etc., depending on the behavior we saw. And hey, no decryption required. It's not required, you don't need it, you don't have the performance for that. It's too difficult. Most of the traffic is with SSL pinning, which you, however, cannot see at all. So don't bother with that. It's also not in the data itself that you will find it, it's in the destinations and the behavior that you will see it. One other example, quickly checking the time. One other example, and this time an unsupervised model. Unsupervised means, yes, it is coached, it's developed, but it has to learn the specific environment where it is running. Because every company is different, right? Every network is different. Different machines, different users, different services, different times, different types of interaction, right? There's many things that are different. And so in this case, we look at a privilege anomaly model. I think privilege, by many of you, is very much linked with IAM, Identity Access Management and Privilege Access Management, the Cyberattacks of this world. The problem, you need to do that, let me be clear, right? No confusion. That is important, you need to do that. But the problem of that is that typically a privilege that is given to an identity or a role is including the most powerful things it can do, the most wide open things. How often is that used? Once a week? Once a month? Never, right? But that is what an attacker is after, that privilege. It will not flag any alert. It will not create any detection because it is allowed. The rule says it's okay. But this is what can be abused, especially in the combination of that privilege with maybe a powerful machine and an interesting service. And so rather than looking at the assigned privilege, we built, with all the data that we see, an observed privilege. And that will help, again, the analyst to understand, oh, this machine, according to the Vectra analysis, has a privilege of 9 out of 10. this is very likely to be an admin machine. And how do you come to that privilege? By looking at the interaction. When you see a lot of machines going to the same host or the same services over and over again, very unlikely. That's SMB, right? That's not a high privilege. If you, however, see one machine going to a lot of destinations, nah, unlikely. That's probably your update server pushing data to all of your machines. However, if you see one machine talking to a lot of services or suddenly to a different service, that is what starts to be interesting, right? It's finding the outlier. And so what we do is we start to cluster. So in this case, the model is going to cluster machines based on what activity they do, combination of machine, service, and account, and then has these somewhere in a cluster. So one model is more specific than the other. So this is something a lot of companies maybe could do, but still you need to combine them all. And then once someone is moving to a different cluster, because of the behavior we have seen, suddenly high privilege account on a server that he never used before, and with a service he never used before, whoa, this is something we need to pay attention to. And that will then result in detections that are named like the trios, unusual service trio, or unusual trio in general. All of the things don't make up. Is this a positive signal that there is an attack ongoing with that machine or account? No, right? But it's a clear signal something is wrong. It could be very much still abuse from rights with no bad intention, could be misconfiguration, could be an error. But at least you should look into it, either correct it if it is an error or misabuse or abuse, but it could also be an attack. And again, it's not just one that matters. You need multiple. That's why you need to prioritize, bring them together, attach them to an account or a machine. That is, you could say, the use case that you have to spend so much time on in your SIEM that just comes out of the technology, right? And then combine that with other detections and you will have a very quick path forward. 9 minutes left. What you see here is the detection in the UI. And what you need to point out to is actually this. So we point out what are the different components in it with the privileges behind it. And then on top of that, we're going also to tell you why this seems to be inaccurate. We also have learned what was the normal in the past. So this is more of an abnormality or an anomaly, but it's on multiple parameters actually that is being built, okay? And with this, you also can see the link that we built in the tech framework from machine to account. I can now quickly click on the account name there. So I'm here on the machine level, no, this is the account level, and I can click on the machine here, or vice versa when it would be on the machine, to quickly jump into the chain of events, right? This is what we built together. So here are the important informations, the baselines, and then the indicators. I'm going to do a bit quick on this section because of the time, because I have one more thing that I really want to show you. But I wanted to point it out that often we are looked at like, oh, you're a competitor to Microsoft, or we already have things from Microsoft, so we're secure. Just want to point out that is not always the case, right? Again, like always, Microsoft is doing, and all of our competitors are doing good stuff. They all have something to offer. But what we see here is that you need to look at the use cases. And when it comes to detections, I think it's very weak, even with an E5 license, and even less with an E3 license. But then when we look into it, you could say, right, actually, with E3, there's very minimal on the security side, so you definitely need something like Vectra. If you have E5, you might be in dubio, but still there is going to be a lot of good use cases, because so often it's still on preventive and compliance-related items, and not so much on detective capabilities that take all of the combinations into account. And that is what is shown here. So this is a combination with E5, or a comparison with E5. You see here again an account, the same entity view with multiple detections. And you can see they're all correlated at once in one view. I can go in detail of each of and every single one of them without having to click through search engines. That is what you will have in your environment with E5 or the Microsoft tools. Maybe one or two detections, and you will probably have to jump in between different views to find all of the underlying logs. The same goes with the SIEM view. You can see the right hand is only changing, the left is still the same, we still have a lot of detections. But when you would look at Azure Sentinel, which is a good SIEM, again, nothing to say about, we have very good integrations with these. But the point is that we deliver an integration into the Azure Sentinel that tells you to look into Mike Scott and not to look into a suspicious login that might be an impossible travel because of a VPN that is boarded. So these type of things you need to really take into account. Is the speed, the quality of the detection. All right, so what does this give us? What are the results? You could say, hey Stan, why are you bringing up an OT use case now suddenly? You've not been talking about OT at all. That is because OT, the biggest problem if there is the attacks happen on IT, 80 to 90%. It doesn't start on ICS, it doesn't start on Modbus or SCADA, it starts on IT. So cover it also with IT. Don't think that with just an OT tool, you will be covered. They will do a good job in asset management, in discovery, in vulnerability validations, but there is no detection, there is no security, or very limited, let me put it this way. And what you see here are very many steps before the OT was impacted, right? And all of these are phases in the attack chain. And you should not wait until the last box, right? Because you have multiple phases, you could say in the survey environment, the machine probably will already be prioritized in the system. Take an action, investigate it. Because of course, the longer you wait, the more quickly it will evolve in the next steps. And then you can ask yourself the question, what is different from ransomware in this case? It's actually exactly the same things that happen. If I would bring up a ransomware attack, you will see all of the same different steps. So here you can cover them all. One use case, very quickly, was with SolarWinds. Every one of you have been bombarded with examples on Sunburst and SolarWinds by every vendor and company you work with. The point here is it was some attack that was moving from on-prem to cloud and vice versa. And this is where you had a lot of indicators. We had all of these indicators before it was a published breach and a documented breach. To ramp it up on this side, and then I have 4 more minutes. What you see here is the MITRE attack framework, right? And typically it's been brought up for covering on network or covering on cloud. We bring it up that we have actually the full set. Don't read it all. We have all of that documented in the support portals, which are free accessibly, by the way. Here you see a lot of those steps. And then I've been talking about machine learning. I've been talking about what we do, how we do it. And I've then also, I think, pointed out in the beginning, it's very important to know where to start from, right? To prioritize that system. But we also acknowledge that it is important to sometimes correlate this with known information. Maybe it's a known threat in your vertical. You want to look for a specific indicator. You want to look for maybe the same indicator in a different branch or in a different part of your network, and you have already an indicator. Why not use that? So we thought we should do that. There's multiple use cases that we are trying to address with this new feature. First and above all, compliance. CVEs are important. You need to look for them. You can scan for them, but you also can look for potential network traffic that can indicate it. And there is lots of detections. ET Open, ET Pro, all of the Suricata, and the word is out, detections that exist already. They are covering for it. The same for threat hunting. You want to look for some specific use case. You want to define something unique. You can do that. You want to find context. We found a high profile based on the behavior. Now we want to validate that is maybe linked with a tool. All of these are good use cases without even mentioning the fact that traditional IPS typically is on the perimeter or on the crossroad, the checkpoints of your different networks. Why not scan it also for east-west? And this introduced me into bundling in Suricata in the same sensor as all of the good we have with AI-driven technology. And it worked like this, the same architecture, but now pointing to the sensor itself. What you see here is we collect the traffic, and we found a way to split the traffic between our metadata engine creation that works with the AI, and we built in reserved threads and cores for the Suricata engine to run. So now you have one simple place, the brain, where you can have, of course, all of our AI, but on top of that, one place to upload up to 25 rule bases, assign the right rule base. Either you build it yourself, or you bought it on by Proofpoint or anywhere else, and you deploy it to the right sensor, and then forward all of the events into the same SOC, into the same SIEM SOAR. And now you can combine the known with the unknown. So, final slide. Conclusion is looking at one use case, which is one of our customers that really went into looking into how can I more efficiently run my cloud business. And they really understood that by developing all the use cases in Sentinel themselves, it would take them probably up to 6 months for about 50 use cases, right? And I think many of you who have worked on a SIEM with a use case, you will agree it takes days, sometimes weeks to build a use case. And you then need to maintain them. Why not use use cases out of the box and work on the combination of those parameters and detections in the system? So they really could drive the time to resolution, the time to detection, big time by leveraging use cases out of the box. Thank you for that, and I'm really sorry for probably 1 or 2 minutes over time. Thank you. Bye-bye.